Welcome to the G5 Hive, the next installment of our Worker Bee series, where we deep dive into the G5 college football landscape with the folks that know the teams the best. If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you're listening in podcast form, please rate and review. Today, we'll be heading to the Sun Belt Conference to take a look at the Texas State Bobcats, who finished 8-5 in 2024. They capped off their season with a win in the First Responder Bowl. They wrapped up their 2025 spring practice with their spring game, which was really more like a practice, on April 12th. We have a special guest joining us today. He is a Texas State sports reporter. He is the host and creator of Win Now or Get Bent. He writes for the San Antonio Express News. He is a Texas State graduate. He is Keff Ciardello.
Wow, what an introduction. That was fantastic. It's great to be here. That video got me so fired up. The Nash Jones thick six touchdown, the Brian Holloway pick six, all of it. That was excellent video. I don't know if you did that or whoever did that, but you nailed it. You nailed the feel of the Bobcats right there.
Well, thanks. Yeah, we created these last year, the first year we did the Worker Bee series, and we just kind of kept them going. And for me, like, it was a pain doing them all, but like I learned so much history that I didn't know about the schools, and like that part made it really enjoyable. But for those tuning in to the G5 Hive for the first time, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, where they can find your work, how they can find you, and how long you've been covering Texas State football?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm Keff Ciardello. I've been covering the Bobcats since 2008 when I was a student at Texas State. I worked for the University Star. Just continued on all through after college and all the way to now. The past 7 or 8 years, I've been working for newspapers around here after writing online. Started out at the Statesman, the Austin paper, for 7.5 years. Been doing some work for the San Antonio Express News. But you mentioned it earlier. The main thing I do is the podcast, Win Now or Get Bent. We cover everything Texas State, mainly football. We've been doing that since 2021. It's, I've done a few different variations of a pod, but this has just been the one that's really stuck. I've got a great producer, Zachary Webb, with me on that one. And we've been doing awesome stuff. You can check us out on YouTube for that one. Win Now or Get Bent on YouTube, Apple, Spotify for all you audio heads out there on the pod formats. Yeah, check us out. Win Now or Get Bent. That's the biggest one. That's where you can find me on those Twitter streets as well at Keff_C, X, Twitter, whatever you call it.
Awesome. Well, moving over to some Texas State football, and let's start with the offense. Texas State brings in a new guy to call plays here in 2025. Their new OC is Landon Keeple. He's been with the staff the last 2 seasons as the wide receivers coach. Should we kind of expect to see the same type of offense that we've seen here the last 2 under Coach Kenny, or you think we'll see something different, or maybe just some wrinkles here in 2025?
I think it's going to it'll look the same in parts, but I think for the essence of it, it's going to be different because what Mac Leftwich brought, the play calling that he brought, not just the last 2 years at Texas State with G.J. Kinney, but also in 2022 at Incarnate Word with G.J. Kinney. And especially at Incarnate Word, they set so many records offensively. I think they're averaging 51 points a game, even though that's FCS level. They get to Texas State. They lead the Sun Belt in scoring both of those 2 years. Mac Leftwich, he takes the job off to Texas Tech. He's calling plays for the Red Raiders now. And it was an internal hire. They moved Keppel to offensive coordinator. He's got a bit of a co-offensive coordinator tag with Shoemaker, the offensive line coach. And that just, I think we're going to see more of a run attack than what we saw under Mac Leftwich. It wasn't like an air raid, all passing style of offense. It was a vertically choice driven offense. It's literally how Mac Leftwich described it. It's like, we're going to go forward, but there's going to be a lot of choices from the quarterback to decide, run the ball, pass the ball, what have you. I think we're going to see a lot more running, especially if Brad Jackson, quarterback, if he's going to be the front runner going into fall camp. The times that we saw Brad Jackson get peppered in, he came in for 3 games. In those 3 games, he scored 4 touchdowns, all on the ground. It seemed like they were doing a lot of direct snaps with him. And it seems that he's going to be the front runner going to fall camp. There's some other transfers that they've brought in. Holden Gerner coming in from Auburn. Keldrick Sloven coming in from SMU. Nate Yarnell coming in from Pitt. They've got some competition there, but it seems like if it is going to be Brad Jackson, it's going to be a very run-heavy offense, especially with all the running backs they have as well. They're bringing back Lincoln Perry, Greg Burrell's a new guy coming in from UNLV. They're bringing back 2 other guys, Jalen Jenkins, Torrance Burgess. I think we're going to see just a more run-heavy offense. But in the bowl game, we got to see Keppel call some plays. It was a pretty basic offense in the bowl win against UNT in the First Responders Bowl. It was a lot of screens, a lot of things like that you wouldn't be surprised to see from a play caller calling their first game. But maybe when he gets more comfortable, gets a little more dangerous with it out there, doing some other type stuff. But I think it's going to be a lot of running. I think the scheme is going to be the same, but I think the delivery of that scheme is going to be different, and it's going to be more on the ground.
Well, you talked about the quarterback, so let's go there first. Last season, the Bobcats brought in former Sun Belt Player of the Year Jordan McLeod, and McLeod performed well with 3,230 yards passing, 30 touchdowns, and added 394 yards and 7 touchdowns on the ground. However, despite these numbers, I feel like the expectations were set so high that maybe some people felt like it was a bit of a disappointment. Well, McLeod's graduated. R.J. Martinez left in the portal. P.J. Hatter's off to Georgia State. And Giovanni McCoy made a brief stop before he's now moved on to Temple. And as you said, Brad Jackson returned. He's the only quarterback who took a snap for the Bobcats to return here in 2025. And then, as you mentioned, they bring in a host of transfers and Garner from Auburn, Yarnell from SMU, and Keldrick from SMU. How did this room look in the spring? And you kind of already led to it, but what are your expectations as we move into 2025?
Yeah, going into spring, leading into it, you mentioned him, Giovanni McCoy. He was of those transfers. He was the guy coming in with the most experience. I know Yarnell had a lot of experience himself as well at Pitt, but McCoy had a ton of experience as a starter. So it really seemed like he might come in and be a front runner. In my mind, I even thought of him. I said it on my podcast. He's my choice to potentially be the starter. And we get in there at the spring game, and we see the quarterbacks come out. It's Brad Jackson first, and then it's Holden Gerner from Auburn, and then it was Giovanni McCoy. Now McCoy looked good, great arm. He was real smooth out there, but he's got 1 year left, looking for his opportunity to play. So he left for Temple. I think that signaled to me when McCoy left, when of the 3 transfers that came in, that was the guy who I pegged as like, okay, he's has the best chance to get in there. When he left, that told me he's hearing something inside there that, okay, maybe Brad Jackson is the front runner. He's familiar with this offense. They drafted him out of high school. They played him as a true freshman last year. I think they really believe in him. I don't, that doesn't necessarily mean he's their guy for the whole season. I think if he is their guy, it's probably just for the first game. And depending on how he does, there's some other guys that are waiting for their opportunity. But I really think he's earned the front runner position that he's in. And Keldrick Luster, I think I said his last name wrong, or Keldrick Luster from SMU, him coming in, they gave him a single digit. It's kind of a coveted situation after the spring. They wait to give numbers till after the spring game. So they gave Keldrick Luster number 6 and Brad Jackson is number 8. So, I mean, even the new guy, because Luster, he came in after spring ball, after McCoy left and everything. So that was them just kind of shoring things up. But even Gerner, though, Holden Gerner, him being the second one over Nate Yarnell, that was pretty telling in spring practice. They think a lot of him. He didn't get a lot of reps at Auburn, but he's got a pretty good reputation. He's got a real big arm. If you look at some of the spring game tape at Auburn when he played from last year, you can really see him demonstrate some of that arm ability. So they've got some real guys in there. And Yarnell, I've heard this. I haven't confirmed it. I've heard he's possibly coming back from an injury, and that's why we didn't see a lot of him in the spring game. And if that is the case, then he has 1 year left, but he's hurt. He could use a medical and come back the following year. So that's why, you kind of expect when all these quarterbacks transfer in, there might be a mass exodus after spring ball when it's decided, okay, here's who's going to play. And the fact that only one of them left, it says a lot that these guys are like, even though somebody's going to get named the starter, they still believe that they can stay here and get their chance.
Well, for those that are not familiar with Brad Jackson's playing style, how would you describe it?
We haven't seen a ton of his arm. I know he can throw it pretty well, but really he's way thicker than a true freshman should be, for sure. When he's out there running the ball, running over guys, Very impressed with his style of running. He takes the ball and he goes downhill. He's not dancing. He's not doing anything. He's just going to go, and he's got some real deal speed. I'm excited to see more of his arm. If we didn't get to see, we saw the spring game, but otherwise, GJ Kinney and co. they closed off spring practice. We weren't allowed to go there at all. There were even times in the past where we could go for the first 20 minutes, just watch them warm up, and that's fine because you see the quarterbacks throw the ball. You get to see a lot of things in that time period. We didn't get that this spring, so there's a lot of unknowns. I'm hoping to see a lot more in the fall camp and see him throw the ball because I know he can. He's out of Reagan High School in San Antonio, relatively local for San Marcos, about 35, 40 minutes away from this area. So we know that he can throw the ball. We've seen it happen. Just want to see it at the collegiate level. Just right now, the small sample size we've gotten, it's a direct snap wildcat runner, but he's definitely capable of more though.
All right, well, let's move over to that running game. And Ismail Mahdi came up 18 yards short of having back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. Unfortunately, the first-team all-conference running back is now off to Arizona, and Deion Hankins has graduated. Lincoln Perry was a touchdown machine for the Bobcats as he led the team in rushing touchdowns with 8. And pretty much America and the world got the opportunity to witness him in that bowl game when he rushed for 143 yards and 2 touchdowns. How did the running backs look in the spring game?
That they weren't tackling, so they couldn't give you a good, fair assessment of it. But I can tell you the good part about this running back room is we saw a lot of them. GJ Kinney, they in this offense, whether it's Mac Leftwich, whether it's Keppel, they like to use multiple running backs. There's not a bell cow. Even when they have Ishmati, like you said, he wasn't the bell cow. They were cycling guys in. You even mentioned Deion Hankins with the Chicago Bears now, real good running back himself. But Lincoln Perry, he's going to be the team captain. Like you mentioned in that bowl game, he stepped up, won MVP, had a terrific game. This was a guy who missed all of the 2023 season. I believe it was a torn ACL, if I have that right. Missed the entire season after leading the team in rushing in 2022. For him to come back and do what he did last year, and now with Ishmati, he's gone, and that's a huge loss. But they still feel pretty good about having Lincoln Perry, having that leadership in that room, having somebody who's been here for a while. This will be year 4 for him at Texas State, which in this day and age, that's so very rare. It's pretty cool to see that he's still coming back. But like I said, they like to use multiple running backs. They went out and got Greg Burrell from UNLV. He's a bigger type running back. I think he might be filling that Deion Hankins role of goal line. And, Hankins could do more than goal line, just like Burrell can for sure. But they definitely got that bigger back. Because then behind him, Torrance Burgess and Jalen Jenkins, they're going to use a lot of those two guys. Both of those two, they had some great runs last year, but they also had fumbling problems, and that's what took away their opportunity on the field. So that's something to watch with those two players. I know Jalen Jenkins himself, when he was at Washington State, he's a bit of a pass threat out of the backfield as well. So something else to look out for. But those 4, they even went and they got a true freshman, Cole Pryor, a local kid as well, out of San Antonio. So they have a good group of running backs. And I really, like I was saying earlier, I really feel like they're going to run that ball a lot more this year than we saw in the past.
Last year, it was kind of a 3-headed monster, but it really seemed like it was really more so like a 1-2 punch kind of Mahdi and Perry. Do you kind of feel like it's going to be like, other guys obviously be sprinkled in, but do you think it's going to be like maybe a 1-2 punch again this year? Or do you think it's going to be distributed more evenly amongst, the whole group?
Gosh, it could be 1, 2, 3, 4. It really could. Even though I rave about Perry and everything that he's done, they really don't like using a bell cow. The closest they got to it was Mahdi, and Mahdi was terrific. In 2023, he led the entire nation in yards from what was it? It was all-purpose yards. He had over 2,000. He even beat Ashton Janty in that one. Because I can remember, as funny as this is, there was a small bit of conversation like, who's the best G5 running back? Is it going to be Ishmati or Ashton Janty going into last year? Obviously, Ashton Janty ran away with that one. But there was a conversation with Mahdi in there. But even with that, he wasn't their bell cow. They would cycle in multiple running backs. And so I definitely think with no Mahdi, I think it's going to be way more dispersed through the group. And they all do different things. I think Perry's kind of your do-it-all. You can run him on first down, third down, short yardage, whatever you need. He's going to be able to get it done. I think you can look at Burrell as like your big back guy, and you look at Torrance Burgess and Jalen Jenkins as kind of like your scat backs, your wild cards. Maybe you run a wheel route out of the backfield or do something interesting with them. They have a nice plethora of running backs, and I think they're going to deploy all of them evenly.
All right, if you had to guess today here in mid June, who do you think gets that first running back carry against Eastern Michigan?
Lincoln Perry. They got to give it to Perry. And that's that one's not fair just because it's not like the quarterback situation where we kind of already know if Perry isn't hurt, that's the one thing. It's health. If he's healthy, he'll get that first carry. But I mean, after the bowl game, GJ Kenny was like, he's going to be a team captain next year, all this stuff. So he's earned it. I think he's earned that first carry. I think ability will decipher who gets the most carries going throughout the year, especially with all those other running backs we discussed. But Lincoln Perry, definitely.
All right, well, let's turn our attention over to the wide receivers. This room loses three guys who accounted for 235 targets, 2,126 yards, and 19 touchdowns in 2024. Joey Hobart and Jaden Williams have graduated, while Cole Wilson is off to Baylor. This room is highlighted by the return of Chris Don Jr., but I got to say, I'm a little bit nervous about this room in the sense of I don't really know what to make of it. You got Chris Don Jr. and Bo Sparks, probably the two biggest names that folks might already know. And then the staff brought in 2 transfers before the spring, another 4 after the spring. So it kind of tells me like maybe the staff has some concerns about the position. What do you think we should make of this room heading into fall camp?
I mean, this entire team, it's pretty remarkable how it is basically across the board from kicker to quarterback. We're looking at that new starters outside of a few guys like Khalil Alexander, Talik Lockett, some of these linemen, but no other position was hit harder than receiver. It's the turnaround at that position is incredible. You mentioned Chris Don Jr. He did some great stuff. You mentioned Bo Sparks. At least I think he did. Bo Sparks, he did some great stuff, a lot of good stuff on special teams as well. But otherwise, it's a lot of freshmen that we haven't seen and brand new guys who transferred in. Even there's some freshmen that are younger that you might see more of, like Kylan Evans. He's the one receiver that they have that's taller at 6'2". They tried to go out and get a transfer, Quincy Brown, to come in. He's 6'4" receiver, but he came in for spring, left at the end. He's at FAU now. So they don't have a ton of height, even with the 4 new guys that they got after spring ball. A lot of them just don't have a ton of size, so they don't have that big target. So I could see Kylan Evans getting in there just for that. But other freshmen, Jordan Martin, Skylar Lewis, these are guys that they think really highly of that you could see a lot of. But I think the biggest of the transfers is Tyron Smith. He's coming in from UTEP. He's a real speedster. I think he played at Cincinnati before UTEP, played somewhere like that before UTEP. He's got a lot of experience. He's got a lot of speed. I think that's somebody you're going to see a lot of in the slot. Who was the other one? Tyquilin Mims coming in from Southern Miss. He's a pretty good receiver himself. LJ Johnson from Texas Tech. That was one of the other ones they got right after spring practice. Maven Anderson. That's the last one I'm not thinking of, from Cal. That was the other one they got after spring practice. Some really good receivers, not the biggest targets. None of them are over 6 foot. So that is a bit of an issue when it comes to these receivers. And Joey Hobart, he's with the Seahawks now. Jaden Williams, he's with the Raiders. You mentioned Cole Wilson transferred to Baylor. Those obviously, if that's where those 3 guys are now, they were terrific for the Bobcats. They relied heavily on those. So fill in those shoes. It's probably going to have to be by committee if they don't figure out here's our guy, here's our new stud receiver at that position. Here's our new Joey Hobart or something like that. It could be very similar to what I was talking about with the running backs, where they're cycling through a lot of guys because they have a lot of bodies between, just the 2 that we mentioned that played a lot last year, and then all the freshmen, and then all the transfers. They have a lot of receivers, but we haven't seen much from them. So we don't know yet. So I'm with you. If there's any position on offense that I am worried about, nervous about, I would say receiver, because I feel good about the O-line. I feel good about running back, tight end. Quarterback, it's a little unknown, but quarterback and receiver are the 2 positions that they go hand in hand too, and that we really need to see more of.
As I mentioned earlier, they have those 235 targets that are vacant. If you had to guess today, like, is there someone that you think can step up and kind of be that wide receiver 1, or do you think those targets are just going to be pretty evenly distributed amongst the group?
I'm pretty high on Chris Don. I mean, he looked great as a true freshman, even better last year. I think if he keeps going on that trajectory, he will ascend even further. Bo Sparks as well too. Bo Sparks, he, as far as a number one receiver, I need to see some more. But I'll tell you what, that guy's got a ton of talent. They had one game punt return. He had two 80-yard punt returns in one game. Absolutely incredible player. So those two returners, and I know they think pretty highly of them as well. So I could see them working their way through it. Otherwise, it's a lot of names where it's like who's gonna beat out who in these spots. I mean, right now, like the best ways to like kind of tell like who are they thinking that who do they really like more than others is who got the single digit, at the receiver position.
Sure.
But especially when they don't let us watch spring ball, that's kind of what we're left to do. But it'll be very interesting to see who can do it. But if I were a betting man and I put something, I'd say Chris Don. It's my guy.
If it does, like, I'm a good story guy. Like, if it does end up being Bo Sparks, and like he's the Joey Hobart of 2025, that'd be like an interesting story, right? Because they both came from the same JUCO. So
yeah,
that'd be
Utah Tech.
Be really cool. Yeah.
It would be, he's got to take the gloves off because Joey Hobart, all those catches he made, no gloves. That was still crazy to see. Maybe Bo Sparks slip the gloves off and just kind of manifest that Joey Hobart style.
Absolutely. Well, let's move over to the tight ends. And if you were to describe how the tight ends are utilized in this offense, how would you describe it?
Underutilized, in my opinion. I'm a big fan of tight ends. I feel like they can be a great security blanket for a quarterback, especially if it's a messy pocket that they're trying to just look for someone to get the ball to quick. And they had a really talented tight end last year in Connor Fox. He was a transfer in from Kansas State. He played 2 years for the Bobcats, and I feel like he was a guy who was underutilized. There was stuff up the seam. You could see him getting open, and just they kind of ignore the tight end. The tight end will block. They'll do a lot of good block, a lot of good things in the run game and things like that. But as far as feeding them the ball, they're somewhat forgotten. And they've got Ty Stammy coming in from Louisiana, a big guy. They've got some replacements for Connor Fox. Blake Smith, he was an OU transfer. So it'll be a battle there to see who's the starter at that position. But I hope that they utilize that tight end more. There was a lot of times red zone, it's like you can really lean on a tight end if you just draw up some plays and get some good plays. They've got a great tight end coach too, Will Bryant. He's a great recruiter. I feel like they've gotten a lot of talented bodies at that position, but it just hasn't been put together.
It seems like that's a common theme with most teams, right? The tight ends are always underutilized. Obviously, there's exceptions, but it seems like those guys often get underutilized.
They're the most athletic guy on the field. I don't care what anybody says. That guy, that tight end, they can catch passes, they can block. They're always super tall. They're fit enough to run all the way down the field. Utilize that guy. That guy is terrific. You see a lot of tight ends who were former quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Those are, I feel like they are a weapon that if used right, it's watch out.
Well, you talked a little bit about some guys on this offensive line. But they do have some holes to fill. They lose their center and left guard to graduation. The right tackle is off to Oregon, but they'll be anchored by the two guys that you've mentioned: left tackle Dorian Strawn and right guard Talik Lockett. How did this unit look in the spring game? I mean, obviously it was a little different, but like, what were you able to glean from that?
Well, not a lot, they weren't tackling or anything like that. So, but I was able to take away size. They're big. This is a big unit. That has been one thing that GJ Kinney and Jordan Shoemaker, the offensive line coach here, since they got here after the 2022 season, has increased the profile of the offensive line by far. Both lines, D-line and offensive line, just big bodies that we haven't seen around here that obviously you need. You got to have not just your starting five, you got to be 2-3 deep in the trenches, and they have recognized that, and they went out and they've gotten a bunch of big bodies. Now they have a lot to make up for. Nash Jones, he's off with the Chargers now. They had their right tackle, he went off to Oregon. They have a lot of holes to fill, and so luckily they have Talik Lockett. They have Ezra. His last name is slipping me right now.
Dotson Oyitade.
Thank you. Yes, I knew it was a hyphen name. He transferred in from TCU literally right before the season started last year. So he wasn't caught up enough on the playbook to play last year. That's their starting center this year. He's a pretty good player himself. They've been able to replace players that they've lost pretty well on that offensive line. It's a lot of new names that I'll be honest, I haven't quite familiarized myself with yet. With some of these, like there was one guy they just signed, Atuni Rapidi, I believe his name is, out of Kilgore College. Like they just signed him. There were other new guys that they've signed, and you look at their profiles, and they are massive guys. They are big guys that you weren't seeing them that size here before. When it was Spavital, Withers, they weren't that size. So that's been one great thing they've done. They've recognized that we don't just need a starting five. We need five behind them and five behind them.
Well, as you mentioned, like going into fall camp, there'll be some battles there. And I'm assuming those battles that we need to kind of pay attention to are probably left guard and right tackle.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, right tackle will be a real interesting one because they've got a guy coming back, Sully Burns, who I was really high on, but they seem like they're really cycling through that right tackle spot. Because even one guy who had a lot of experience at that right tackle, Trenton Scott, he went all the way through spring practice, went through spring ball, and then he left. I think he's at Nevada now, something like that. So there's going to be a bit of an open competition at that right tackle. And whichever side they decide to put Talik Lockett on, it seems like he can have some versatility, right or left guard. But yeah, the on the interior for sure. I think center is pretty much locked in with Ezra, though, like we were saying.
Who do you think this room will look to as the leader of the offensive line?
Oh man, I think Dorian Strawn, or Abibo. Abibo is returning. That's another guy, that other guard position. I think he's going to take it along with Lockett. And he can be versatile, even though his twin brother transferred away. They both were here. The Emeka's still here. But I think Dorian Strawn is somebody who has a ton of experience. So does Talik Lockett, but Dorian Strawn has been specifically with GJ Kinney, if I have this right, going back to Incarnate Word. So he's been with him a long time. And it might be the strongest guy on that offensive line. He is an impressive individual. So I think that's who they're going to lean on with Nash Jones leaving, because that's who it was before. It was Nash Jones.
All right. If you had to pick an offensive player to have a breakout type season in 2025, who you got?
A breakout season. I mean, I know Perry had a breakout game against in the bowl game. I think this is going to be a breakout season. We haven't seen many 1,000-yard seasons since the Bobcats win FBS in 2012. We really saw it from Rob Lowe 10 or so years ago. Then we saw it with Mahdi once, almost saw it with them twice. And like I was saying, I think they're going to run the ball a lot this season. He's going to go into it as the team captain. It's going to be his fourth year on the team, third year in this system. I'm looking for that breakout year, if you will. I feel like I don't know if a lot of other people would consider it a breakout because he did lead the team in rushing in 2022. But I think he had like 700 and something yards. When I say breakout, I mean getting the four digits, getting the comma in those yards, and getting over 1,000 yards. I really think he has the ability. And if that's my hottest take going into the year, it's definitely that I think Perry is going to be on fire this year.
Awesome. Well, let's move over to the defensive side of the ball. For those not familiar with the Texas State defense, can you describe the style and the scheme they run?
Sure. 4-2-5. That's the style or the scheme that they run. Their style, they're just constantly trying to sack the quarterback. I mean, it's almost like sack or bust sometimes, the way that they go. Even when it's just their 4-man rush, they really their coverages and everything, the way they'll do it. In 2023, they did a lot more man coverage. I think they had more players that they were confident in the defensive backfield. So we saw a few more zone, but they are trying to get the quarterback on his backside before he can throw the ball and hurt you. I mean, that's why with the D line, they don't go too deep. They go 3 deep. Like if you're third string defensive lineman on this team, you're going to play 3 or 4 series in the game. They cycle through a lot of defensive linemen because they want to keep them fresh and they want them to pin their ears back and just go every single time. Sometimes it bites them in the butt, but other times they can have games where they're just keeping the quarterback in the dirt the whole time.
Well, let's take a look at these defensive position groups and start with the guys up front along the defensive line. As a big Sunbelt fan, I felt last year their defensive line was very underrated. They didn't necessarily get the credit that they deserved. I thought, like you said, they were getting constant pressure on the quarterback. Heading into 2025, though, it's a little bit of a different story. I'm a little bit nervous about this room because they lose 6 of their top 8 linemen to the portal or graduation. It's highlighted by the return of Khalil Alexander and Jolazon Landry off the edge. Alexander led the team with 7 sacks, and Landry was second with 5 in 2024. And they also added 10 guys to this room from the portal. What are the expectations as we head into 2025?
It's hard to, and I absolutely agree with you. I feel like that was the most underrated part of this team, defense or offense, was how deep and well the defensive line was. And they lost a lot of guys. You mentioned it at the top, Khalil Alexander. I think that's going to be almost your captain on the D line, if you will, going into it with how much experience he has. And he just keeps elevating his game every single year. So really look out for Khalil Alexander. They even upgraded him to number 2. He gets that coveted single digit. You mentioned Jolazon Landry. He was a true freshman in 2023. They finally gave him some more good playing time last year, made the most of it. So he's gonna send further. Another guy's Tymir Jackson. They gave him number 0 this year. He came in, was a JUCO guy last year. Didn't play a whole lot because, like we said, they were pretty deep on that defensive line. They bragged about him so much in fall camp, though. They were like, even if you don't see a lot about him, Tymir Jackson is a terrific player. So that's somebody to watch out as far as a returner. Now, after that, it's a lot of new guys. It's J.P. Dieter from Arizona State. It's Kennard Snyder coming in from ULM. It's a lot of new guys at that defensive end spot. I think more so where there's new guys is the interior D line. The only returner you basically have is Cam Washington. Otherwise, you're going to see a lot of DeVark Woods, Charlie Leota, some other interior linemen that I'm forgetting because they brought in so many. There's just so many of these guys, and they're all going to play. Like I said, with the way they run it, the way they run this defensive line, it's going to be a 4-2-5 with 4 down linemen, but it's going to be 12 linemen playing that game. So even though they go out and get 10, 8 of those 10 are going to be heavy in the rotation. They're trying to replace by committee. Go out and get a bunch of bodies after you lose some really good players, and we'll see if it works. On paper, you look at their D line. I'm less worried about the D line than I am, say, like receiver. Receiver is a very worrisome position. I think they were able to go recoup a lot of talented players, but I think it's just going to see who really thrives in this system and who's going to be their stalwarts on that D line.
If this line is able to repeat some of the success they had from 2024, is there one guy you feel is kind of the key to that happening?
Oh, Khalil Alexander. I mentioned him already earlier, but I think that he's going in there, senior leadership. He's been there in the last 2 years, 2023 and 2024, when there's tons of success on that D line, and he was heavily involved in that rotation. He understands the system. He understands what he needs to do, and he keeps elevating himself. That I think that he can be that player that, and you want to say Ben Bell, but then he didn't play all of last season. But you look at other guys who stepped up, like a Bryce Bass for Texas State last year, and I feel like he can really be that and step into that position, because it really was Khalil Alexander and Bryce Bass last year that stepped in. Specifically, Bryce Bass coming in from Gardner-Webb did great, but he was one and done with the Bobcats. But replicating that, if you can do it in one person, I think it's Khalil.
Well, moving over to linebackers, and I'm going to sound like a broken record, especially about these defensive rooms, but a lot of questions with this linebacker room heading into 2025. Yeah. They see their top 4 guys based on snap counts depart. Traylon Payne is the guy with the most experience in this room from last year heading into 2025, and he only played about 18 snaps a game. What are your expectations for this linebacker group heading into fall camp?
Yeah, and I mean, even the one name you mentioned Traylon Payne, he had a really good bowl game, but Michael Boudin moved over from defensive back to linebacker, which seems odd. You go from DB, that's kind of, you think, a smaller position, but he's 6'4", 230. He's a bigger DB. They played him at the star position, which is kind of their nickel corner position, nickel back, if you will. That star position already stands right next to the linebacker whenever they line up as that 5th DB. So him just going from right over here to right over here, it seems like it's going to fit real nicely. They gave him also a single digit number 3. So that's a returner to definitely take a look at. Otherwise, it's a lot of new guys. In fact, I even as you were bringing up linebackers, I was pulling up a roster because I was like, I got to look at some of these guys, like Terrence Cook's coming in from Texas, Ashton Heflin coming in from Georgia Tech, Chance Johnson coming in from Texas A&M. Those are just some of the transfers. I mean, Colt Sparks, Carson Kaiser, he was a quarterback in high school. Those are 2 high school kids coming in playing linebacker. So there's only 2 of them in this 4-2-5 defense. So they're going to have to really figure out who their starter is. I think you can pencil in Boudin, and maybe you can pencil in Payne next to him because a lot of these other transfers are younger. But it is very much so an open competition at those 2 linebacker spots. And that was even last year. 2023 was a great year for their linebackers led by Brian Holloway. In fact, that video you showed at the beginning, he had a nice pick 6 in that. I enjoyed revisiting that one. They had a terrific linebacker unit in 2023 that took a step back in 2024, and I think it's still there, still in the step back mode, unless somebody steps up. Maybe Boudin comes in there and he shocks the world, or Traylon Payne puts it together, or one of these other new guys does. But when we talked about receivers and how that position worried me, this is the position that worries me on defense, is linebackers.
Okay, well, let's assume this room is absolutely lights out in 2025. It's because who stepped up big?
Payne and Boudin. I mean, I think they're real hyped up on Michael Boudin. I mean, he's a local guy, went to Hayes High School, which is just 15 minutes away from San Marcos. He is somebody that they've really liked since they got here in their system. And moving him to linebacker, they gave him the podium treatment after the spring game where he got to talk to the media and stood up there and everything. I think that says a lot about where the coach's mindset is with that particular player. And if he can step it up and be lights out after moving over from DB, they kind of get a free pass, if you will, at that linebacker spot. Then I think that's going to say a lot. If they can move a DB over and he's killing it, that says a lot for the rest of the unit. The rest of the unit's probably doing well themselves if that's going on.
Well, let's move over to those DBs in the secondary. In terms of snaps, this room loses their top 3 defenders and several rotational guys. This room looks like it's highlighted by the returns of safeties Ryan Nolan, Darius Jackson, and cornerback Trez Moore. Moore was tied for a team-leading 2 interceptions in 2024. The staff, like the other positions on the defense, brought in 6 guys via the portal. And again, I've said this before, I kind of feel like a broken record, but I have to continue to ask, with all the turnover in this, on the defensive side of the ball, where are the expectations for this defensive backfield heading into fall camp?
Justice, man, I got to tell you, I appreciate you mapping it out, just how massive the amount of turnaround and changes, because I feel like I've done a few episodes of my pod where I'm like, guys, everything is different. Everything has changed. And we've gone through every single position, and it's massive amounts of change across the board. It's incredible. It's a turnover like I've never seen covering this team, especially after they had a lot of turnover after 2023, and then even more after 24. It's pretty remarkable, and especially at the DB unit, they a lot of turnover there. You mentioned some players coming back. One, Bobby Crosby at safety. I think he's going to get a lot of playing time. He may even start a little bit at safety. He's played a lot of time in this defense. Darius Jackson, of course, you mentioned him as well. He's a pretty solid player himself. But they're losing Torrey Spears and Caleb Culp and some of these really big players. Joshua Eaton at corner, he left for Michigan State. Chris Mills, the other starting corner, he graduated. You mentioned Trez Moore, he did great in rotation coming in. But I think really these starters, this is going to be a little different than other positions that I've talked about. At that corner position, I think it's going to be 2 new transfers that are going to start. One corner, you got Kamari Terrell. He's coming in from Oregon. He's a terrific player himself. And then one who's a little bit lower on, not on a ton of people's radars, Jaden Lawton. He's a JUCO player, but he had about 40 offers. Some P4s were offering him, some real deal schools. Just seemed like he had a previous relationship with Matthew Gregg, the corners coach here from Kilgore College, when they were in JUCO. So they had a prior relationship there. Probably was saying, hey, if you go to these P4s, you're not going to play as much. You come here, you'll be a star. You'll be a focus of the defense. So them being able to bring in Jaden Lawton, I felt like was a big time coup. So Kamari Terrell and Jaden Lawton, two transfers that I think are going to get in there and play quite a bit. That star position is pretty wide open because they're moving Michael Boudin over to linebacker like we talked about. And their other guy that they played a lot there, Caleb Coleman, he transferred out. He was formerly a West Virginia player that transferred in. I don't know exactly where he went though. So that one is a little bit in the air. Who are they going to put at that nickel position? But it is going to be some new bodies mixed in with some starters at safety. I feel like some returning starters at safety.
Well, who do you think can take their game to the next level for the secondary in 2025?
I won't say the corners that I already mentioned, but I did mention Bobby Crosby, and he's another player where the bowl game, like Lincoln Perry was one guy who shined in the bowl game, won MVP, but Bobby Crosby was right there doing great stuff as well on defense, some real timely plays. He's somebody that is senior year as well for him. He's been at this school for a while, and that might be his fourth year. It's at least his third year. It could be his fourth year here at Texas State. So I'm really looking for Bobby Crosby. And I know I pulled up that roster looking at linebackers. I want to do it again just because I'm pretty sure. Yeah, they gave him number one. He's another guy. They moved him up single digit, number one. I think it's a goofy thing, but it's always telling. They give the guy the single digit. They're confident in him. They believe in him. And moving Bobby Crosby up like that, I think that says a lot about where they're feeling.
All right, well, just like on the offensive side of the ball, I'm going to ask you on the defensive side of the ball, if you had to pick a defensive player to have a breakout type season in 2025, who you got?
Give me Khalil Alexander. Khalil Alexander once again. I'm very, very high on Khalil. I've watched him just slowly improve every year he's been here and just mature into a leader and everything. I really think that he's gonna step up. He's basically the elder statesman now of this new look defense. So it's that's my guy. That's who I think is if there's an underrated player on this whole team, I feel like it's Khalil Alexander. I feel like not enough people talk about what he does, just because it may not be the box number, not lighting up the box number with all his stats and everything, but what he does is huge for this defense.
All right, we've talked offense, we've talked some defense. Now let's move over to the special teams. How are those special teams units looking, and are there any concerns?
Stop me if you've heard this before, but we have new guys. They're transfers across the board. There's a new punter. There's a new kicker. There's two new kickers. There's one coming in from USC named Tyler Robles from the Trojans. USC's coming in. That looks like there might be their field goal guy. They have a guy who's coming in named Michael James, who's transferring in from Tarleton. But the year before last year, he was at Texas State. So it's the very rare retransfer in where they went away and now he's back. He's probably going to be just their kickoff man. And punter, the name is failing to hit my brain right now. I know I was just looking at punters too. Sorry if I riff. Nick Salmon, there he is from Melbourne, Victoria, Australia, at a FAU, another transfer. Nick Salmon coming in. So it's a whole new squad. I couldn't tell you much about how anybody looks. I know that they are missing. They lost Mason Shipley, who is the best kicker this school has ever seen, which is saying a lot because Jacob Bates, the Detroit Lions kicker, went to Texas State. But I don't think I'm speaking out of turn by saying that Mason Shipley literally hit a 60-yard field goal at NRG Stadium last year against Sam Houston State in the first half, and then he missed a 36-yard field goal in the fourth quarter. Very, very odd game. I'm not a kicker. Can't think of the psychology behind it. I do know the Bobcats lost that game by 1 point, so that's why that sticks in my mind. But Mason Shipley, great kicker. I think in 2023 he went 15 for 15. Didn't even miss one all season. So he's kicking for the Longhorns now. That's a big loss to make up for sure. Punter wasn't a new punter, but they were not kicking the ball well punting last year, so it was kind of to be expected. They made a change there.
Well, now that spring practice is over, which position group or groups do you think is the most concerning heading into 2025?
Concerning offense, wide receiver, defense, linebacker. Those were we kind of said those earlier. Really, it's unknowns for both of them. Even at linebacker, there's players that I do know, like Traylon Payne and Michael Boudin, but Boudin, it's a whole new position for him, and Payne was never really a starter. So it's just a lot of unknowns there. And receiver, I mean, you laid it out earlier. Those top three that are gone, two are in the NFL. One of them transferred to a P4. They are out some real weapons at wide receiver. So it's going to be some new studs for them showing up this season.
Well, in today's age of NIL, revenue sharing, and the transfer portal, how have you seen that change Texas State's recruiting philosophy?
Man, I mean, it's I feel like it's changed everybody's philosophy where it really it's now you have to re-recruit players. It seems like you have to re-recruit your guys that are still on roster every single day. You're not just trying to recruit and bring in new guys. You're trying to keep those guys. But it has changed. I feel like it's allowed Texas State to surpass some G5 schools, not all of them, but the ones that aren't like, oh, we don't necessarily have all this amount in the coffers to go out and spend on NIL. Texas State has a little more than some of these schools, or maybe more than some of these schools are willing to spend. So they've been able to get a little more competitive in recruiting, where they're able to get guys. I can't speak for sure if it's NIL or what have you. Someone like Jaden Lawton, when you look at his list of offers, you're like, wow, Texas State got him. Yeah, sure, he has a previous relationship with Matthew Gregg, the corners coach, but you got to imagine that money talks, and they were able to pitch him some sort of amount in that recruiting pitch. So I think that's been the biggest thing. And when you have a coach like GJ Kinney, he's a younger coach, so it's not like he's set in his ways. Oh, I recruited before NIL, and I'm used to a certain way of things. He wasn't. He came in. His first year was smack dab in the middle of NIL. So this is just all he's known, and he has embraced it. And even as a coach and even as a player, he was a transient guy. I mean, he was transferring before it was cool. In 2007, he went from Texas to Tulsa and set records at Tulsa. So he understands the importance of transferring, and it's even if a guy comes in and they leave, it's a business decision. It's how you have to kind of look at it, and they have very much embraced that. I feel like NIL has helped Texas State. As odd as that sounds, I don't know if it's necessarily helped the G5 as a whole, but I know for Texas State against other G5s, it has helped the Bobcats for sure. And I've seen them embrace it. The school president here, Dr. Kelly Damphus, the athletics director, Don Coryell, they have embraced it. And that's saying it's a total 180 from the regime that was here before with Larry Tice as the AD, and that everything that was going on then. It's a total 180 where they understand that sports is your front porch. It's what everybody's going to see. So you gotta really curate it, invest in it, and drum up support. Even though they can't write the check themselves with NIL, they will first and foremost go out and be there at these NIL events trying to drum up support. So they've embraced it, and we'll see how it goes forward with revenue sharing. I mean, obviously it's going to be way harder for these G5s to participate in revenue sharing, but the athletic director, Don Coryell here, has already put out a letter last week saying they are fully committed to revenue sharing. They're going to go as all in as they can. And so I applaud that. I think that's what a lot of these G5s need to do, especially when it's looking like the big daddies, the big programs are trying to split off and do their own thing. It's like the G5s need to step up, because they're great. They're really good at football. They get those nice big fat media checks, but there's real ball played all across this country, especially in those G5s. So that's why I appreciate what y'all do with G5 Hive. I think this is a really cool series, really cool channel. It's fun to come on here and talk about this.
Thanks, man. We definitely appreciate the kind words. Given the fact that it seems like the P4s really seem to kind of focus on the transfer portal and getting those players, have you seen Texas State perhaps have an access to a higher level of recruit than maybe they have had in the past?
Oh yeah, I do. I mean, even thinking about Jordan McLeod, that was such a coup for him he won at JMU. He won Sun Belt Player of the Year, Offensive Player of the Year. And then the Bobcats team, they had a whole situation with TJ Finley and Jaden DeLauro. That was a whole fiasco where they had both and they had neither. So they needed a quarterback before spring ball, and they're able to go get Jordan McLeod. And I know I can't exactly say, oh, this is how much he got, this is where it was. And I know he got NIL money. I've heard I've heard the stories. Probably won't say the story on the pod because I haven't been able to confirm anything specifically, but they were able to put some stuff together and bring in a player who won Offensive Player of the Year in their conference. And they got him to transfer within that conference and just come over to Texas State. That was huge for the Bobcats last year when it was looking like, oh man, they're not going to have a quarterback and they may be SOL after everything blew up in their face, and they were able to still go get him. So I think, yeah, like a player like that, you wouldn't have seen that happen before NIL, definitely.
What do you think the main strength of this 2025 team will be?
That's a good one, because even when I try and think about it, I think about their offense running the ball. I think they're if they're gonna do that and that's what they want to be the most effective, it's got to be blocking. It's got to be their offensive line. That's what really needs to step up more. That's on my mind the most is the offensive line, because they do have some really good players there, but they did lose some other ones. Where can it be as strong as a unit that if they want to lean on it and rely on running the ball? But I think I'm really confident this O-line. I mentioned Dorian Strong, Talik Lockett, Jordan Shoemaker, the offensive line coach. I think he's a terrific coach. I think he could be the best offensive line coach in the Sun Belt. Maybe I'm biased there, don't know, but I think that's their strength.
What does success look like for the Bobcats in 2025?
Man, before it would have been a winning record in a bowl game, but they've done that 2 years in a row after they hadn't done that for 10 years. I would say at this point, and I hate to set the bar too high, but I really think Sun Belt championship. I really do. I think what they've improved over the last 2 years, been 8-5, won a bowl game. They've done all these things. There's even a lot of talk of Texas State. Oh, could they move to the Pac-12? Could they? All this stuff, but they haven't ever won the Sun Belt in football. And I think that's what needs to be their standard, their idea of success going forward after what they've done the last 2 years. I think now you need to start looking for banners to hang up at your stadium. So you don't have that 8-5 is nice, but you're not going to get a First Responders Bowl banner hanging up at UFCU Stadium. They gotta go out there and win the whole damn thing. They've yet to do it. My first year covering the Bobcats, 2008, they won the Southland Conference. That was the last conference championship for football. It's been that long. It hooked me that long ago. I've been addicted to these Bobcats since, and keep reliving Brad George winning that game in 2008. But they definitely need a conference championship. I think that needs to be the barometer for success. Maybe there are still some people that'll be happy with a winning record. Happy with a bowl game and everything, but I think the standard needs to be conference championship.
Is there a particular part or point in the schedule that you think is kind of really critical to kind of achieve that goal?
Oh gosh, I'd have to pull it up, the schedule right here, because I don't have it fully memorized right now. It's been I feel like I keep looking at personnel, players, and everybody that's moving on. I've yet to even fully dive in on it. Gosh, I know non-conference is going to be real difficult for them. Yeah, I do. Right here, when October 28th, they're playing James Madison. They're going to follow that up with going to Louisiana. I think that little area, and even the week before, they're playing at Marshall and then Troy, Arkansas State. Honestly, it's the first 4 games of conference. When I look at it, that little gauntlet right there, because that's right after non-conference. It's Arkansas State, Troy, Marshall, JMU, Louisiana. I think those 5, because Troy is a team that they beat last year that's given them fits. Arkansas State, it's a team they beat last year, but they're starting to build more and more of a rivalry as it goes on. Marshall, they've did some great things. They lost their coach, so we'll see how they look this year without Huff. JMU's JMU. Last time Bobcats played them, I think they lost by 40, and they've never beaten the Raging Cajuns. 0-13 versus Louisiana. Wow. 0-13. That's why if there's one specific game, if it's that Louisiana one. But I really like looking at those first, maybe after we'll take out Troy and Arkansas State, and you look at Marshall, JMU, Louisiana, just that little three-peat right there where it's JMU at home, real tough opponent, then road dog. That's going to be a tough stretch for them. I think the schedule is tougher than last year, and so that's going to be the one thing about when I mentioned earlier about them winning conference and that being the barometer for success. It is a little more open, if you will, the Sun Belt, like who's going to be where, who's going to control what. So maybe they can take advantage of that in a year where there's a bit of a vacuum. But that's still a tough schedule. Looking at it, it was that's probably why I haven't looked at it in a while. I didn't remember it. I like memory hold it. I blocked it out.
You kind of alluded to it earlier, but it seems like these rumors pop up, I don't know, like once every 3 months or so, about Texas State going to the Pac-12. And so I got to ask, like, is there any fire with that smoke, and what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, and you know it's funny because it seems like it's a lot of Twitter rumors and everything. There is a lot of fire to that smoke. It's not a done deal. I know negotiations are ongoing. They're definitely trying. I mean, we heard rumblings about it as early as last summer, and during the summer, I was like, "Get out of here, Pac-12. We're in Texas. That's the West Coast. What are we even talking about?" But then once it got into the season, it became more and more real because you'd start to hear it through the grapevine. And then you start to ask people that know some things, and they're like, "We can't really talk about it." And well, it's like, "Oh, you guys are actually doing this. You're negotiating. You're really trying to figure it out." I mean, so much so the Mountain West offered Texas State to realign and go to the Mountain West, which would be right now in the Sun Belt. Texas State makes $2 million a year. The Mountain West pays $4 million a year, which is more than the Sun Belt. But you add in the travel costs, they would probably be about a wash if they went to the Mountain West. So they want to hold out for the Pac-12, where the travel costs would be very similar, probably a little more, but at least similar, but they'd make a lot more, maybe as much as $10 million a year in the Pac-12. You know, they're speculating between 8 and 15 million, might land around that like 10 million spot. So they are really, really trying. And I know that the school president here, they were offered a half share for the media rights deal. As I think it was a few months ago, 2 or 3 months ago, where Dr. Kelly Damp, the school president here at Texas State, he tweeted out, I don't want a half bowl of soup. I want a full bowl of soup. And that went a little bit viral because he was obviously alluding to something about the Pac-12. And so that's what it turned out. They're trying to get Texas State to sign a half share so they don't have to pay it as much. It felt like the Pac-12 was waiting for UNLV to see what they would do. But after June 1st, their exit fees kicked in. So they couldn't leave they had to submit some sort of letter by June 1st to their conference, and if they didn't, then their exit fees would be very exuberant, and so that put UNLV basically out of the running, which put Texas State right there. I know that a lot of people here are motivated for it, mainly from a financial aspect. You go from $2 million to about $10 million. That does a lot. You can use that for revenue sharing. So they are very much trying to position themselves for the Pac-12. And I don't think anybody is fooling themselves that, it's a power conference. I think we're looking at, it might be the G6 hive after a while. You may have to rename this channel, because I think that's what it's going to be. It's going to fall more in line with. But in this crazy landscape of college football where so much changes and the power schools are trying to break off and do their own thing, this is a great way for Texas State to position themselves to possibly have a seat at that table. It's not a great chance. It's a pretty fat chance, but it's better than nothing if they were to try to make this move. So, yeah, there is a lot that is a legitimate situation going on. The Bobcats looking at realignment. It's not a done deal, but it could by the time this comes out, who knows? It very well could be, because I've been hearing that it could be very, very soon, because they're motivated to get that 8th team. They need that 8th team in order to maintain their conference.
Absolutely. Well, Keff, we've covered a lot of ground today, but is there anything else you want to share, think that we should know about this 2025 Texas State football team, or even maybe some things that you got coming in the works with your own stuff?
Man, I think we covered it with the Bobcats. But, if you liked what you were hearing, go check us out. Win Now or Get Bent on YouTube. I mentioned my great producer, Zachary Webb. We've been doing a great addition to our pod called Wizard Wednesday. I call him the Wizard because his editing skills are incredible. Every Wednesday, he's been doing great stuff. In fact, he was just talking about the Pac-12 last Wednesday. Awesome stuff about why he thinks Texas State should join the Pac-12. So, yeah, check us out. Win Now or Get Bent.
Well, Keff, I just want to thank you for taking some time out of your day to spend with us. This has been really great. And just share your knowledge of all things Texas State. We greatly appreciate it.
Absolutely. Back at you. Thanks for having me on.
If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you're listening in podcast form, please rate and review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Thank you all for your support. And until the next time, we are the G5 Hive.